We will start shortly. A few things when we start, is you will be able to ask questions. We have a chat room, and in the chat room you will see that you can write your chat as a question. So make sure that you know that, and then you ask your questions. To the right, you should see a chat. When we write something, see if you all can see it. Perfect. I see some responses here. And while we are in the webinar, feel free to ask any questions that you want. You don't have to wait until the end. You can ask anything you want while we are in the webinar. It will not distract us. Don't worry about it. This is interactive. And we will speak about different things. We will speak about, of course, Mexico, but not just about Mexico as a whole. We will speak about investment. We will speak about what other people think about Mexico, how we invest in Mexico. And Sandro, let's do a sound check. Can you speak so we can make sure we can hear you?
Yes, good morning, Jorge. Good morning, everyone.
I make sure that your microphone is not muted. So your speaker, make sure that your speaker is on. Can you hear me, Sandro, when I speak?
Yes, I can hear you, and my speakers and headphones are on 100%. Can you hear me, Jorge?
Can everybody hear Sandro when he speaks?
Jorge, can you hear me?
Good morning, everybody. We have more people coming in. Let me do another sound check. And everybody hear Sandro when he speaks? Yes, no?
Yes, okay. Good morning, Jorge.
Sandro, we're having some problems with your audio.
My microphone's on.
Perfect. I can hear you now. Perfect. Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. My name is Jorge Olson, and I am here with Sandro Biancone. Let's get started. Why is Mexico the next big thing is going to be the topic of our event today. Now, remember, you can ask questions. You have a way to ask questions while we are speaking with the chat. Ask away anything that you want, and we'll get started, and we will show you what we'll talk about during the presentation. What's the agenda for today? Well, we're going to introduce ourselves. We're going to do an overview of Mexico. We're going to see what analysts want to know about investing in Mexico, what Wall Street analysts ask us about investing in Mexico, what fund managers, hedge fund managers, and other mutual fund managers and other managers ask about investing in Mexico, what you should know as an entrepreneur or investor about investing in Mexico. And then we're going to talk about opportunities in Mexico. But first of all, the introduction. My name is Jorge Olson. I will be your host today. I've been doing business in Mexico for a long time. I've also done cross-border business from the US to Mexico. I've helped Fortune 500 companies do business in Mexico. Startups do business in Mexico, help Mexican companies. But most interesting probably to you is that I've done over 50 engagements with institutional investors about investing in Mexico. And I have some feedback and some know-how that I'll share with you about what they're looking for and what you should know about investing in Mexico. With me is Mexpert Sandro Pianconi. Sandro, how are you today? And Sandro is an investor, entrepreneur, and everything that you would like to have somebody do in Mexico, he's done it, including starting businesses, running businesses, exporting products, writing 4 books, Sandro. My God, 4 books about Mexico, investing in Mexico, selling in Mexico. What else have you done in Mexico? Okay, and I've known Sandro for a long time. We've done business travel through Mexico and done a lot of things in Mexico. You can ask questions to both Sandro and myself throughout the webinar. Feel free at any time, like I said, to interrupt and ask your questions. I have all of your questions here.
Hey, Jorge.
Yeah.
Jorge, I need to do my introduction again. Jorge, they can't hear me. Patrick, some people said they can't hear me. So I think now the microphone is working.
I think it's not working because now I can hear you much better than before. Everybody's saying that now they can hear you.
They can now. Yes, they can hear me now. Yes.
Yes.
So let me give my introduction again. I apologize. My name is Sandro Pianconi. I am the Chief Mexpert Officer for Mexico Sales Made Easy. It is a real word now. We trademarked it, the word expert, Mexpert. We say we don't have a degree in international business or sales. We just made more mistakes than anyone. So over the last 14 years, we've started and opened several businesses in Mexico. Some were great. Some didn't work as well as we planned, but over the last 14 years, we've done over $500 million in sales for our companies and our partners.
That's awesome, Sandro, and I call that a PhD.
Well, we'll stick with Mexpert right now.
Okay, let's continue. And again, as I mentioned before, everybody can ask questions while we go. Don't be shy. So first of all, Mexico Sales Made Easy. Let's talk about what we do so that we know, so that you know what we do. Besides having incubators, have done business in Mexico for a long time, this company that we formed is doing 3 basic things. Number 1 is helping US and other companies around the world do business in Mexico, including franchises, including people who export products, including international companies with offices in Mexico. Number 2, invest in Mexico. We invest in Mexico and we help other companies invest in Mexico through us and directly. And number 3, we work with Mexican companies. We accelerate Mexican companies, and we have an accelerator in Mexico where we take companies on and we help them with everything. Investment, rent, they live with us. Providing management, marketing, sales, distribution, and everything else. So those are the 3 main things that we do. Now let's jump to the overview that we were talking about, to the Mexico overview. And we're going to talk about some of the things that you see here, population, economy, and other things as they relate to Mexico. We're going to go quickly through this because one of the things that Sandro and I always say is we want to tell you what you can't Google. Again, we want to tell you what you cannot Google. Some of the things here you can Google and learn, but the things that we learned by doing business in Mexico, you cannot Google. although this is important, but we'll go quickly. A profile of Mexico, more than 160 million people in Mexico, and you see some tidbits here. Now, what is important from this is that according to the World Bank, right now, Mexico is the 14th largest economy. But in 2020, it'll be top 10 economy. It's stable everywhere with growth, with unemployment, and with other things that you'll see as we go forward. Why is it easy to do business in Mexico? Well, it has metropolitan areas like Mexico City, Guadalajara, Monterrey, Tijuana, and the greater Baja California. By the way, Tijuana is a floating population, so it increases to more than $2.5 million people, and then it goes down. Mexico City, it's 20 million by itself, but the greater metropolitan area is 30 million people. So if you're in Mexico City, Guadalajara, Monterrey, and Tijuana, you're national. That's important. So it's easy to do business in Mexico. Transportation is there, logistics is there, infrastructure in telecommunications, internet, etc. to do business is also there.
Yeah, Jorge, a very important part on that. From those 4 cities, if you take a 2-hour circle and draw it around there, you hit 70% of the population of Mexico. So very important. You may look at those numbers and say, oh, it's about 30 million, but the population from 2 hours from around those centers is about 70% of all the population of Mexico.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And then you can get your product, services, or anything else to those people just by being in those cities. And another important point, Sandro, is they all have incredible infrastructure, airports, international airports, etc. Right?
Correct. A strange thing in our marketplace here in Tijuana, there's 3 international airports within an hour and a half or 2 of driving, which is pretty rare. So 3 international airports that you can go to Japan, China, Tijuana, Mexicali, and down in Cabo. So pretty interesting.
Oh yeah, yep. Some overview of the economy here, and you can see what we focus on here to the left. These are some of the industries that we like, and we'll talk about more about that. Foreign direct investment, that's very important, and a lot of people want to know about that. We'll touch on this. This is just an overview. Here to the right, you see some of the companies that we have here. These are just on the border, not in the entire Mexican region, just on the border you have, and more than that, of course. Now, I'm going to jump quickly about what analysts want to know, Sandro. Because when Wall Street analysts call, they all have the same questions and they all want to see the same data. And again, we're going to go through all of this really fast because what I really want to show you is where the opportunities are and what you should really know, not just what the analysts want to know, but what everybody should know. And I'm looking often here to see if anybody has questions. No questions so far, so we'll continue. And here, they want to know about direct investment. They want to know about debt. They want to know about investment per industry, who invests in what. Of course, inflation and international investment risk levels are some of the other things that the number crunchers want to see. The 4 major investment indicators that they want to know are these: government debt, inflation, credit, transparent credit for Mexicans or for citizens, and then the investment risk level for the country. These are what all of the big time Wall Street analysts want to know. They don't want to know about crime or about the government or who's in power because they say they cannot measure that, which is very interesting. They want to know numbers. They always want Mexico by the numbers. Just a few numbers here. The government debt by GDP is 46.4%. Mexico's debt is doing better than the US, and also some other growing companies like Brazil, India, and some European countries such as Poland, Spain. So Mexico has lower debt, both as a percentage and in total, than the United States. Inflation is steady, less than 3%, 2.59 currently, according to the World Bank. The risk level is 2.5%. This is very, very important because this is one of the things the World Bank uses the most to measure risk into that country. But the one thing that I want to mention here is the transparent credit system, because Mexico has a new credit system, El Buró de Crédito, which is very, very important. Every citizen has a credit system in Mexico. Without your credit system, without having good credit, it is very difficult to find a job. Now, Sandro, tell us a little bit about credit as a consumer. What happens when you don't pay your bills in Mexico?
Yeah, and this is fairly new, as you said. I mean, in the U.S., we've had it for 30 years. We had TRW, we had Experian. In Mexico, it wasn't there, so this is recent. They're much tougher in Mexico than they would be in the U.S. So both companies and consumers are paying their bills on time. They really don't want to have a problem with their credit. They won't be able to get a house, which the government helps them finance. So it's much better paying their bills in Mexico than they would in other parts of the country.
That's something that a lot of people don't realize, that debt follows you in Mexico, right?
That's right.
It follows you around. That's great when you're selling something, right?
That's right. Yeah. The debt is yours. You can pass it. The debt passes down the generation. So you want to pay your bills on time and pay them in full.
That's right. And now it's also a measurement of character. So when you're looking for a job, a lot of people run credit. So
Correct.
People now are taking care of their credit, because then they can't find a job, they can't get a house, a car, but a job. So that's major. That's major. And here you can see an overview of Mexico and international trade. And by the way, all of this information will be available in the video. And if you want the PowerPoint, just send us a note if you want the PowerPoint or you want to share the information with somebody else. Investment countries. Who is investing in Mexico? Number one, it's the U.S. This wasn't the case before, by the way. The U.S. is investing heavily now as foreign investment. Another thing to note is there's a formula to measuring foreign investment. This is money that goes directly into projects. This is not money that they invest in their own companies that do business in Mexico, which is very important to note. This does not include exports, which, Sandro, tell us a little bit about exports from the U.S. to Mexico. What's happening there?
Yeah, we're the second largest trading. Mexico is the second largest trading partner to the U.S. They do over $1 billion a day of product crosses our border. So the two big borders you'll know about, which is San Isidro, which is near San Diego, and Laredo. But there's more than that. But $1 billion a day is crossed every day from U.S. manufacturers into Mexico. And so here where we are in San Diego, it's the second largest cross-border for trucking, the first being Laredo. We do have a statistic that we are the #1 pedestrian crossing border in the world. So over 1 million people cross the border every day to conduct business, either from Mexico into the U.S. or U.S. into Mexico. So $1 billion a day of product is being transferred over, anything from aerospace parts to parts for cars to televisions, which you'll get into, and spaces we play with are consumer goods, cheese products, and food and products like that. But $1 billion a day is being crossed over into Mexico every day.
That's an amazing statistic, just so everybody knows and can put it into perspective. Sandro's talking about 1 billion with a B, $1 billion of product is crossing the border, not sold in Mexico, because it's more than that. Just crossing the border into Mexico from the US, it's $1 billion. Now, it doesn't mean that there's only $1 billion being sold, because that doesn't include products manufactured in Mexico from US companies such as Coca-Cola or other products, Pepsi-Cola, Procter & Gamble products, etc., which is a lot, and we'll talk about that as well. Here you can see where foreign direct investment is going to. And just so you know, when we talked about population, Tijuana is all the way at the top. In Baja California is all the way at the top. You can see it. And that's a major area. Monterrey, it's to the right and a little bit down. You can see there as well. And then in the middle, you can see Mexico City and the surroundings. And you can see that that's huge. Now let's switch into fund managers quickly. What do fund managers, hedge funds, mutual funds, and other people ask me when they call me? Well, they want to know about the same companies. They all want to know about FEMSA, Cemex, Grupo Modelo, Walmart in Mexico. They want to know how the retail industry works. They want to know about consumer packaged goods. Some of them want to know about other things such as autos, telecommunications, oil and gas. Now, what do I tell them when they call me? I tell them, did you already read the report from those companies? Do you already know what they do? Yes. Well, then I tell them, well, you already know that. Let me tell you what you should know. You know the numbers. What should you know about those companies and about investing in Mexico? Well, if you're interested in those companies and Mexico as a whole, you should know about the retail industry. You should know that it's not supermarket centric, that it is changarro centric, which is selling to independent stores. Sandro, how many independent stores do we have in Mexico?
Yeah, it's over 700,000. So what's different than the U.S. is there's 700,000 mom and pop stores. Some of them are so small, they're maybe 8 by 8. And so it's someone's garage in a town, and they'll open up their garage and they'll have refrigerators, and they'll sell Coca-Cola, and they'll sell cigarettes, and they'll sell Sabritas and different products like that. So people will go there for their daily things they need to buy, soap, things like that with Procter & Gamble. And then in the cities, there'll be supermarkets. So people think, who feeds these, who supplies these 116 million people? And, the first thing that does come to mind is Walmart, because they are the largest employer and the largest supermarket chain in Mexico. But more volume goes through those 700,000 mom and pop stores than they do the traditional chains, as we would call it, the Sam's Club, the Costco's, so on. So much like it was in the US 50 years ago.
That's right. And that's very interesting, Sandro, because one of the things these funds should know is exactly that. And that's what we tell them. And we tell them they pose no immediate risk to Walmart as they are right now. But because the other chains already catched up to Walmart in their best practices, there's some there. Now it's an opportunity for those investors, entrepreneurs. The opportunity is not in starting a big chain. The opportunity is solving problems for those 700,000 locations, like credit cards, right, Sandro? So that they can take credit cards and other things. There's a huge opportunity with those. We call them changarros.
Right. Well, exactly. It's solving the problem from logistics to products that they may need to them accepting debit and credit cards. Most of them still collect money out of a shoebox, but some of them, are interested in accepting credit card or debit cards. But that's a challenge, as the new change that's happening in the U.S. now with the EMV happens in Mexico. So they don't want to invest in all those things. So there's an opportunity there. Yeah.
That's right, Sandro. You know what? Let's talk about that opportunity right there. Mexico was an early adopter, right, with the credit card chip.
Well, let's clarify that, since I have a little experience in that, or a lot more experience than I want to know. They were an early adopter on paper back in 2011 that they would switch over. All the banks have not switched over, and for sure all the vendors have not switched over. So even though on paper the law says that they would switch the EMV, the restaurateur, the mom and pop stores were not switched. They still had the old technology. And just this year, some of the banks are not allowing the charges to go through on the magnetic stripe, and some are. But you'll see the same in the U.S. It was supposed to take effect last week here in the U.S., and it'll probably be a couple years before The local hamburger, the local pizza shop will have the chip pin. So they were early adopters on paper, but reality, it's taken 4 or 5 years.
Oh, wow, that's a lot. But that technology I saw in Germany about 15 years ago, so it's not new technology. In the US, I've seen it now in a few places as well. So the US is also adopting it, right?
Well, yeah, they were late to the party, and so they're just starting last week. But of course, the big companies are already in there: McDonald's, Walmart, Target. But in Middle America and all the small stores, it'll take time to get there.
Okay. Now, other things that funds ask or they should know is they always ask about government. They always ask about corruption. Now, Sandro, you've done business, a lot of business. Tell us what your take is, because we always get entrepreneurs that tell us, I know somebody in the government, I know somebody here. Do you need to know somebody? Do you need to participate in that? Is that real, or is that just something as a myth?
Well, it's a myth. It's a good story, and I think it inflates people's egos that they know someone in the government. 14 years doing business in Mexico, over 500 million in sales. I don't know anyone in the government. I really don't want to know anyone in the government. They could change governors, presidents, entrepreneurs get up in the morning, they go to work, they make sales. Unless you're, in the defense area, or you're going to be doing something in the oil and gas, where you need a government contract, and the same in the U.S. I mean, how many millions of entrepreneurs get up every morning in the U.S., do business, grow their companies, and never have a dealing with the government other than their local permit. So we have several companies in Mexico that, we have a business license that we pay once a year. It's, 300 pesos, maybe $20, and that's the most of it. Because we do importation, we deal with the border more, but that's more to import the product. But if we were selling product made in Mexico, we wouldn't even need that. So from the government standpoint, when you say, oh, I know someone in the government, again, we're really not interested. It's not really an effect. Let's go to the corruption, because I think that is probably the biggest myth that most people have about corruption. We have signed different agreements for a U.S. company, and soon to be one of our divisions, U.S. public traded company, that we don't Foreign Anti-Corruption Act. So we have never done it, and we never will. Even if someone at the border, if their truck is stuck and they may want something or ask for something, we'll send our lawyer over there and get it fixed, because then it just becomes a slippery slope. Does it happen? I'm sure, but if people stick to it and do business the proper way, they will never have an issue. And there is people to help with that. If you think there's no one, we have a U.S. embassy right in Tijuana. We have the U.S. Commercial Service. If ever a problem were to happen, you can call them and do it. But again, unless you're doing a government contract, I don't think you would need to ever know who your governor or who the president is. And the same in the U.S. Things change, and you can get political and say one atmosphere is better than the next. But if you're an entrepreneur, you're out there and you're selling, it doesn't matter.
That's right. And just for everybody to know, that Sandro was speaking about the U.S. Commercial Service. We work with them. We met with the administrator that reports directly to the president. Well, we work with the Small Business Administration. We work with ProMexico, with the U.S. and Mexican consulates as well. So we are constantly on the U.S. and the Mexican side talking with organizations, nonprofits, to see how better to do business in Mexico. And if we have a problem, we call them. And when we do events, they come to our events. So stay tuned, because we are starting live events that you can come to and sit with us here in San Diego, California, to know about Mexico. We also do trips to Mexico, CEO tours. So let us know if you're interested. You can text me here if you're interested on either the live events that we have in San Diego or going to Mexico with us. We call that CEO tours. Sandro, tell us a little bit about the CEO tour so that people understand what we do.
Yeah, we have CEO tours for different industries. One is consumer goods. Another one is for franchisors, but it's basically, people have never been to Mexico or never done business in Mexico. They may be afraid of it. They don't know what's really going on. So we plan a trip where they fly into San Diego. They come see our facilities, they come see our distribution. We actually fly with them to Guadalajara. That's where we've been putting it on, in Guadalajara. And there's a trade show. It's the largest trade show in Latin America called ANTA, where we'll have a booth there. And then what we actually do is they sit at the booth. We have seminars at night. We take them around and visit a Walmart, a Soriana, a small mom and pop store. They get to see customers. We go to a Centro de Pastos. So after 3 days, they get a real feeling for how business is done in Mexico and if their product, because they'll get to see other products similar to theirs, or if there's something that's not there, and then why. They can ask the consumers, they can ask managers of stores why. We also set them up guaranteed with 3 buyers that can from supermarkets, so they can talk to a buyer at Walmart or Soriana.
That's right, and we have a couple of questions. Let me see here. The cost of the tours and the boot camps. We have different events, and some of them are a couple of hours. Some of them are where we have to travel, so you have to pay your traveling expenses to Guadalajara, Mexico City. We have those as well. And costs vary from a small event, about $100 to $200, to a tour where you have to pay for your expenses, and then plus your expenses, the cost is about $1,000. And we provide appointments. If it's, let's say, a consumer show at the largest Latin American show, we provide translators. We provide private sessions with buyers. So you can sit in Mexico, you can sit with buyers. They'll give you a chance. So these are not just walking around shows, they're buying shows. So we get you with the translator, or we can go with you to sit with buyers. And then it also includes all of the events, dinners, etc. with us. And then the small events that we have here in San Diego range from 2 hours to a whole day event. Our next planned event is for franchises. How franchises can sell globally and in Mexico especially, because we do a lot of franchises in Mexico. We take them to Mexico and we handle everything, logistics, sales, etc. That's one of our business models. And we see here a lot of people are interested. I hope that answers your questions. We have other questions about credit, citizens having credit.
Yeah, Jorge, I'll answer that. You talked about the credit bureau, so it's much like the U.S. You have to apply for credit, and so there's some people that don't want credit. Of course, they would not have it. Most people, 70% of the working people have a debit or credit card. No, I'm sorry, 70% of the population. So anyone who has a job, they get paid on their debit card. So if someone goes ahead and instead of getting a paycheck, they get paid through their bank with a debit card. So it'll have a Visa or MasterCard logo, and that's how they get paid. And about 22% of the people have a credit card. So that's why we made the statement where the small mom and pop stores would want to accept it, because 70% of their customers have a debit or credit card. But not necessary. They could still, of course, take cash, and any company would appreciate taking cash.
Yes, and just to make sure Steve got the correct answer, when you have a job in Mexico, you have a debit card. Simple as that, because the law says that you have to have access to cash as an employee. Before, you have to pay people in cash. Now, you can give them a debit card, and then they just carry the debit card around. They can go get cash, so they have immediate access to cash. It's done through direct deposit. So, Sandro, in your estimates, you've done some studies. What is currently the credit and debit card per population?
You mean, well, 70% of the population has a debit or credit card, and 22% of the population has a credit card. So at least one, but there, of course, several people have, 2 or 3, like in the U.S. But the thing of where they send you the every day in your mail, you would get a 1.9. That doesn't exist in Mexico yet. But yeah, 22% of the people have a credit card, and 70% have a credit or debit card.
Great. So that's great information, and there's a big opportunity there as well. If you think back, almost everybody has a card. We could say that every family has a card, but they're not accepted everywhere. So people on the webinar, that's another opportunity. Now, something interesting for investors, this is more for independent investors, you probably already invest in Mexico and you don't even know it. Sandro, tell us why people already invest in Mexico from the US and don't even know it.
Well, yeah. So I am a shareholder of many consumer goods companies, from McDonald's to Walmart to Home Depot to Coca-Cola. So those are US-based companies, but if you actually go in and read their annual reports, a lot of these companies make more of their income from foreign places, one being Mexico. So Coca-Cola, I think they make more profit in Mexico than they would in the US. And so if you're investing in any of those companies, so your mutual fund, if you invest in any of these companies, even Disney, Warner Brothers, they have businesses in Mexico. So are you investing in a stock that trades on the Mexico Stock Exchange? Probably not. But the companies you are investing in invest their capital, invest their business model in Mexico.
Okay, and then some other people are also interested in collaborating with us on the shows and the tours. Call us and we'll talk about it, both for the tours and the events that we have in San Diego. Now, as Sandro said, if you invest in major companies in the US, you are investing in Mexico because they're probably the most profitable in Mexico. A lot of the companies make most of their profits, not sales, but profits in Mexico, including beverage companies, consumer good companies, and banks. Now, some of the opportunities for Mexico, for investing in Mexico, to the left, you see some traditional ones, oil and gas, alternative energy, wind and solar, the car industry. Forbes mentioned that Mexico is the new manufacturer of cars for the US, so most of car manufacturing from the US, it's going into Mexico. Electronics, if you own a flat screen, it was not just made in Mexico, it's made just across the border, about 100 meters from our office where we are right now in Tijuana. Most of the flat screens are made there. Medical devices growing in Mexico. Now, to the right, you see some of the things that we are interested in. We invest, we incubate, and we have businesses around this. Banking, we are lending, for example, money for equipment and other things. Small businesses, we incubate, accelerate, and own small businesses in Mexico. Franchising, of course, taking the best of the US into Mexico, the best companies with best practices marketing into Mexico. And if you walk through Mexico, you'll see every franchise that you can imagine, even just crossing the border, just going to our office in Tijuana, you see tons. Sandro, what are the franchises just from our office where we're right now to our office in Tijuana? What are some of the franchises you pass when you drive?
Well, yeah, you'll hit about maybe 15 of them. We'll say franchise, but just driving down the road, you'll hit a Costco, you'll hit a Walmart. You'll see a Domino's Pizza who's been there 30 years. You'll see a Little Caesars Pizza. You'll see Carl's Jr. You'll see McDonald's. You'll see Burger King. You'll see AutoZone in the auto parts space. You'll see some paint companies. So a whole, as I said, 15 different, and that's just, an 8-mile ride on one street. That's not even a main street. So all of the top franchisors have already come into Mexico. Starbucks has come in recently and doing extremely well there.
Now, Starbucks, is that owned by Starbucks or is that a franchise in Mexico?
No, it's a franchise. So I think the second time ever where they did a joint venture, a franchise, master franchise with a group, the Domino's Pizza Group. So Domino's did so well over the last 30 years that they now are opening up Starbucks in Mexico.
Oh, wow. So you see one of the only places, right, that has franchising for Starbucks. It's
Yeah.
Mexico.
Yep. They were probably the model. It's probably happening in other places, but they needed a partner in Mexico that knew Mexico. Jorge, is the slides up, or because I'm seeing you? I don't know if everyone else is seeing you or the slides. I lost the slide.
I'm a control freak, so they kind of see what I want them to see. I switch between the slides and.
Oh, and someone typed in Subway. So yes, there's Subways. Yeah, I don't have every single franchise that's in Mexico, but there's quite a few, and I could go on, for 50 of them. If when we take people to the franchise show in Mexico City, everyone is there. Even if they have one store, technically they're in Mexico. So yes, but Subway is doing very well also.
That's right. And franchising is big. That's why we're involved with franchising. Then you have other things that we're involved with: transportation, technology. We incubate a technology company there in San Diego. They actually live, like I said, in our office. So those are some of the opportunities that you have and that we are currently in as well. Something important, Mexico, it's not just for big funds, because these big funds that are calling us, they're interested in exactly that. Who is already in Mexico? Who is big in Mexico? And when I ask them, Sandro, when I ask them why they invest in the big funds, in the big company, they say, well, I don't speak Spanish. It's usually what they tell me. I don't speak Spanish, so I can't invest in Mexico. What do you think about that?
Well, there's two reasons. Obviously, we've been in a lot of meetings with a lot of funds. They have to place a lot of money. So if they're investing in if it's a publicly traded company, there's liquidity, but there's also audits, and it's on a Mexico stock exchange. So that's probably the biggest reason. Second, the other thing is that there's information out there. So. But that opportunity has already gone. They've already gone public. The returns are where the opportunity is in the smaller companies, but they can't get the information, or they think there's no audits, which there are, which we'll get into in a little bit. But yeah, I would say it's the language and the amount of money they have to place is probably the two big reasons. And the information. They can't get information on small to mid-sized companies.
That's right. And I hear a lot, well, I don't speak Spanish, it's dangerous, and I don't know the industry. Well, we're there every day. We speak Spanish, and we know the industry, we know the business. So Mexico is not just for big funds anymore. Now, if you're interested in investing in Mexico, give us a call, either doing business or putting money directly into companies in Mexico or through us. You can invest in us, and we have holdings in Mexico as well. And we have liquidity because we are filing to be a publicly traded company. Now, some of what we're doing in the US, some of the things that we do, like I said, seminars, education. We bring the safety of franchises into Mexico, so we are working with franchises. We do sales, and we do right now a little bit of banking with lease capital equipment, among some other things. In our accelerator, we have a Sofom who leases capital, internet company. We own a part of a pizza. We own part of these companies and other companies. Just to give a general idea, Sandro is an investor. He is an entrepreneur. One of his investments is, for example, Vidbox. Now, Sandro, just so everybody understands, I don't want you just to talk about Vidbox. I want you to talk about why, first of all, why Mexico? Because people hear me, and some say I don't have a British accent, and they figure I'm Mexican. I was born and raised in Mexico, but you were not, or were you? Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born so far away from Mexico. I was born in New Jersey, in Sayreville, where we like to say good pizza and Bon Jovi come from. So as far away as possible. My parents are both from Italy, so I'm second generation Italian, first generation Italian. And what brought me to Mexico was a business opportunity. I worked for a family company selling, of all things, Italian and pizza products into Mexico. And then we, with a group of investors, acquired our first company and have since invested or acquired in over 6 or 7 different companies in Mexico because we see the opportunity. We're not that smart, we like to say. We see things that work in the U.S. and transfer it over to Mexico. And on certain things, Mexico is 20 to 30 years behind. And so we see that, and we're able to bring things from the U.S. and bring it into Mexico. And a perfect example is VidBox. I'm sure it looks familiar to a lot of you in the U.S. It's actually, we have the license from Redbox, and so our plan is to replicate the success Redbox had in the U.S., but in Mexico.
Okay, so how did you start with VidBox? Did you go rent the Redbox and then said, well, this could work in Mexico, or what was the process for that one?
Well, if you can see me on the video, I'm a big movie guy, so I have movie posters in the back. I am a client, a fan of Redbox. We would rent movies all the time. I have 2 boys, and so we're big into superhero movies, so we rent movies, bring them home. We just love Redbox. But really, it started out as my job for one of our logistics companies. I'm in, as one of the owners, and Sagros is marketing, bringing new customers. And I thought, what a great thing it would be to bring Redbox into Mexico. And so from an idea to start with, to be just a client, we would handle their logistics, their importation, their routing, delivery. Because really, at the end of the day, it's an entertainment company, but to execute it, you have to be a logistics company to be able to service the machines, fix them, and so on. So everything we thought would happen is what we knew, and it came to fruition as things in life normally happen, and ended up changing completely from them being a client to us being the client and having the license agreement and purchasing machines from them. So it worked out quite well. Perfect.
Now, what are the numbers for, just so we can get an idea? What did you see in Redbox? How much are they selling in the U.S.?
Well, yeah. So everything I'm going to say is all public knowledge. I happen to be not only do I love Redbox and I'm a fan of it, I'm also a shareholder. So things I'm going to say, you can go and Google them and look it up and get their annual statement. But Redbox did over $2.2 billion last year. So, which was kind of shocking to us when we first started down this. Very interesting that they did that much in business. And they have over 43,000 locations, so they're in every single supermarket, convenience stores. They were actually started by McDonald's, so there's still thousands and thousands of McDonald's in the Midwest that have these in there, and then actually some are actually outside through the drive-through, which is kind of cool. So yeah, they rent. Their claim to fame is they rented movies at $1 per night. Now they have since increased the price, but it's $1.50, but it's still a great value compared to, spending $6 on your cable or something like that.
That's correct. And just so people know, this is one way of investing in Mexico or doing business in Mexico. Identify what works in the U.S. and just take it to Mexico, such as franchises, such as Redbox that does around $2 billion with a B, $2 billion in the U.S. And now Sandro has a contract, right, Sandro? It's an exclusivity.
Yeah, it's a license agreement with the exclusive for Mexico. We have a non-compete with them. By purchasing these machines, we agree not to come into the U.S. and compete, which we never would. But our contract, and vice versa, they won't come into Mexico. And so they've given us support, help, training to get this and launch it into Mexico. So it's been an exciting ride. We did like most people would. We're investors. We had a few questions before we invested our own money. Question number 1 was, how many people have a DVD player? That's kind of important. And so Deloitte is does our auditing for our different investments. And so they came back and said 92% of the households have a DVD player. Well, that was pretty good. And then second, how many people had credit cards? And because the machines don't take cash. So that's where our figure comes out, is that only 22% have a credit card. So if we would have went into this with that number, we probably wouldn't have invested in this venture. But because everyone who works has a debit card, that's how they get paid, then we decided to make the investment, and people are using their credit. And it's exactly, if we look at the numbers, we get 80% debit, 20% credit cards. And so we did a test. We invested over $1 million to bring in 100 machines. We did a beta test. It worked better than we thought it would. And then what we would call double down, but 40 down, we acquired 4,000 machines, and we're, as we speak, rolling them out throughout Mexico.
Oh, wow. That's great. Now let's talk about, and by the way, if you have questions, don't forget to ask your questions. And some of the questions, I'm going to start it off. Some of the questions that I get all the time is Mexico safe? We already talked about that, about corruption. We talked about corruption. Who invests in Mexico? That's a very good question. And then a lot of people are already interested in our next events. A lot of people ask me about that. And then who is a perfect prospect to go to Mexico? These are some of the questions that I get, and I'm going to open it up for questions. Like I said, we try to cover things that you cannot Google. We try to cover things that are boots on the ground, our experiences, the opportunities that we see for investors in Mexico, etc. So I'm going to open it for questions, and you can use your chat and start your questions. Yes, Sandro.
Yeah, Jorge, let's talk a little bit about, is Mexico safe? I mean, we all watch TV, so it's either CNN or Fox News, and they talk about Mexico and the drug cartel and so on. And if you watch that, you would never go to Mexico or ever do business in Mexico. But the same could be said about Chicago or Detroit or places like that. So I've been doing business in 14 years. Thank God. I've never had a problem, never had a truck stolen, never had a warehouse broken into, but we're very safely the way we do business and how we do things. And so, of course, there's crime. I'm not going to say there's no crime. You just have to be careful, how you do business there. So from a safety standpoint, there's probably bad areas, but that's the same in San Diego. There's bad areas in San Diego or wherever someone lives. So I think the corruption we talked about, it's there. You just choose to partake or not partake and move on is probably the best. Who invests in Mexico? I'd like to answer that. We talked about it. So there's the big hedge funds that come and invest, but really who's investing is the companies. Companies see an opportunity. It's working in the US, it's working in France, it's working in Italy, and they say, hey, we're going to come to Mexico. These are consumers, we can do business there. And so it's really the company who's coming in, and then if you're an investor in that company, technically you're investing in Mexico. But yeah, I have 3 or 4 financial advisors, brokers, and they really never call me and say, hey, do you want to invest in a stock in Mexico? It doesn't happen that way. They'll call me and say, hey, you want to invest in Amazon? And then, of course, Amazon just opened in Mexico, and they're bringing a big push for that. So that's really, who's investing in Mexico, other than the hedge funds directly or private equity directly.
We have some great questions here. How can I access boots on the ground marketing feedback? Well, it depends what you want to know. And this question was from Patrick. Patrick, it depends on the industry, depends what you want to know. We have offices all over Mexico, including Tijuana, Hermosillo, Guadalajara, Mexico City, Monterrey. So we're in stores, in supermarkets, we're in businesses. We are all over the place in Mexico doing business. So we can probably help you providing some information. If that's not enough, or if you're looking for scan data is available for Mexico through the regular scan data sources, wherever you buy scan data, Nielsen's being one. So that's available. So that's a good start. It depends on what business you're in. If you tell me a little bit more, I can tell you about that. Right. And another question that yes, Sandro?
Yeah, and the other thing is, as you said, it depends on what it is. You know, a great resource, there's a lot of reports out there. We have several books on the industry, but more consumer goods. The U.S. Commercial Service puts out a great report, and you can actually call the U.S. Commercial Service, and they can help you do a lot of those things. So yeah, there's reports out there, but of course there are agencies out there, market research, and you say, hey, I want to hire this person to find out a certain thing, and we're investors in a cheese company, and the cheese company came out and they were doing a new product, so they did a taste test. They brought them in a blind taste test and had them look at it and what they thought and so on. So yeah, an ad agency can probably do it, or there's other people that can do it. So
great. Now I have a few other questions. From Patrick for the beverage market, Patrick. In yoga studios particularly, exercise is getting to be very, very big in Mexico. I am on the board of advisors of a gym chain, and I help one of the largest gym chains in Mexico as well. So I'm both as a person and as a businessman involved in gyms in Mexico. If you're just interested in one thing, such as yoga, yoga studios by themselves are not big, but as part of gyms are very big. Now, what I would advise you to do, Patrick, is start by reading my book, Build Your Beverage Empire. It tells you about that industry and what you can do in the U.S. And then we have some beverage-specific videos, audios, etc., for that as well. If that's not enough, then we can help you directly with that. Another question is, are beverages distributed in Mexico? Yes, they are distributed all over Mexico. As a matter of fact, let's say Coca-Cola, Mexico is the #1 drinker per capita. Beverages represent about 40% of all goods sold in a supermarket, so beverages are extremely big in Mexico. We have other questions.
Yeah, Steve asked a question, if Mexicans can work for a U.S. company as an independent contractor. Is it common? Yes, it's common. So if you get up in the morning and you're a consultant, so you're a lawyer, you're a designer, you're a stay at home, doing jobs. Yes, you can make an invoice and bill a U.S. company, and they'll wire the money. Most people are not independent contractors. They want to work for a company. So there are a whole host of services out there that will employ the person, pay their Social Security, pay their taxes, pay everything, and then give you a bill in the U.S. You'll see that more often. But yeah, if you hired a real marketing person or a lawyer or an accountant or just a consultant to pick you up and take you around when you show up to Mexico, you can do that. He'll give you an invoice and you'll wire the money and everything. So hopefully Steve answered that question correctly.
And one interesting question is about culture. Is there a culture difference between the U.S. and Mexico? That's very interesting, and we talk a little bit about culture when we do the seminars. And I always want to talk a lot about it, but we don't have a lot of time usually to go into detail. But yes, there are some differences. I think there are very good differences, and we'll dig and dive into that next time, or we'll do something specifically about doing business in Mexico. And just so you know, right, Sandro and I are writing a book called it's a guide to doing business in Mexico, and we'll touch about culture as well. Now, if you want to get in touch with us, there was some questions about that as well. Just email me at info. I'll write here the email you can send it, so we can have it. It's info at jorgeolson.com. You can reach Sandro and myself using that email. That way you can ask questions, or we can arrange for a call, or maybe you have questions that are private you don't want to ask. Another question that I get, Sandro, is real estate. It doesn't pertain to this call specifically, but I want to touch on it quickly. Yes, there's a way of owning real estate, both commercial and private real estate in Mexico. As a matter of fact, we're going to do another webinar about investing in real estate soon, how to invest in real estate in Mexico. Some of the largest companies and funds, REITs, etc., are investing in Mexico because you get yield, a better yield in commercial, not in residential, but commercial real estate. So another opportunity for investors is commercial real estate in Mexico. I say we answered all of the questions here.
We did. We went down, we answered them all, and of course, if someone wants, they could give us a call.
All right. I don't see more questions. Thank you, everybody, for joining. If you want other topics or you need other topics for other events, webinars, seminars, live events, etc., just send me a text, send me an email with your ideas for events, and we will tackle them. I know your time is valuable, and I really appreciate it that you decided to spend it with us. Until next time, bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.